Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
I went to college in a small school in Wisconsin, Beloit College, Beloit, Wisconsin, easy to remember. It's right on the Illinois-Wisconsin border. And part of that experience, that 4-year experience, I went there to play football. I didn't even visit. I won't even get into that story right now. But I went there to play football, and a lot of great friends. Many of us were in the same fraternity together, Sigma Chi fraternity. Neither here nor there. But the neat thing about the fraternity, there were a lot of neat things. One of the neat things is that you didn't have to eat in the cafeteria. We had our own cook, and it wasn't elegant dining, but it was decent. It was right there, and when you're cooking for 30, 40 people, it's a whole lot different than cooking for 1,000 people. So it was good. But the way it worked is that the cook would make things, and she'd have it down in the kitchen, and you'd basically serve yourself. You take a plate, go down and load up your plate, and you walk up the stairs to the dining area. The dining room was a large dining room, and you eat with the guys, and it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of joking around. So there was one particular day, I probably my sophomore year, I'm not sure. I think it was my sophomore year. Got a plate of food, followed another guy up the stairs. Halfway up the stairs, he fell, and kind of fell forward. He hung on to his plate somehow or another, but his back leg kicked up and it hit me in the hand, hit my hand that I had the plate with just one hand, hit my plate. My plate went up in the air and it didn't come crashing down. It literally went upside down on my hand. So I had mashed potatoes or whatever it was, just kind of on my hand. I thought it was hilarious. I just started laughing. And immediately this particular individual, I'll leave his name out of it, was like, oh my God, rather than owning up to, hey, I slipped and fell, which wasn't a big deal, was not terribly uncommon. The stairs it was a fraternity. It was pretty dirty, greasy. That he slipped, he saw my knee went out. And it was really kind of odd, say, okay, my knee went out. Just own up to the fact you fell. And that leads in today's program on using failure to create success. And I know there's an aspect of failure to creating success, or what I want to talk about is success in relationships. There's certainly an aspect of our failure leading to our successes in life. All of my failures have led me to this point right here, right now. That's why I get a kick out of people who say, hey, Frank, how can I be like you? How can I, well, there's I don't know if I can duplicate it. There's all these little failures that kind of led me in this direction. And, it's easy to say, well, just do this and this, but the failures really kind of led the way. And without those, I wouldn't have had certain opportunities. And so failures are certainly part of success. But what I want to talk about is failures in creating relationships. And I use that first story because I was kind of like, all right, you know what? You can't own up to the fact that you fell. It's just, it's not that I had a long-term dim view of this person, but in that moment, it's like, really, it's not a big deal. We can laugh at ourselves. We all fail. And, we need to be willing to admit to our failures and shortcomings, because those things really start to build our relationships with other people. Yeah, I know we all want success, and I get it. And we feel like that we need to put forth this persona of success. But to a degree, success can be its own enemy. I wrote in the book Chase Greatness, one of the books I released, the subtitle of the book is Life Lessons Revealed Through Sports. And it's just a collection of sports stories that I picked up over the years. I would read a story, or somebody would send me a story. And these aren't stories of pro athletes for the most part. They're stories of high school kids and small college athletes. There are some professional stories in there, a couple Olympic stories that are really kind of old at this point in time, early Olympic type stories. But that's what the book's about. but there's a story in there that illustrates how people can be funny about success, about other people's success. There was a 9-year-old in New Haven, Connecticut. This was back in 2008. His name was Jericho Scott. And 9 years old, he was a great pitcher. 40 miles an hour. I can't throw 40 miles an hour, but it's major league. Compared to major league, it's nothing. For a 9-year-old, it's great. And he wasn't a wild pitcher. He just had great control, and he could throw fast. He was just striking everybody out. And I remember hearing about this story. It was either on ESPN or the radio. And so I went out and grabbed all the information I could to write an article about this. But the parents of the opposing teams wanted him kicked out of the league because he was too good. And I mean, I do a whole podcast episode on that, but it just kind of underscores that people sometimes are funny about success. They're funny about other people's success. And I think, we all want success, but we need to weave within that success the notion that we have failed, we've struggled, we've had shortcomings. It's not been easy. I don't know anybody who's had an easy path. People will tell you that they have an easy path, but I don't know that. I don't know that. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I don't necessarily believe it. Relationships are built on people knowing us, liking us, and trusting us. And part of that is owning up and being open about the failures that we have, the shortcomings, things that didn't work out for us. And not necessarily blaming someone else, not, hey, my knee gave out or blaming somebody else. Is just, you know what? I fell on the stairs. Let's all, I'm going to laugh at me. You can laugh at me. We'll move on. It's not, it doesn't define me, but our relationships are built on know, like, and trust. And being open to the notion that we've had failures really serves to bring people towards us. And I think a lot of times people are afraid to admit their failures. They're afraid to admit their failures because people will shut them out. And my experience, and again, it's my experience, I'm a sample size of one. My experience is that's been anything but the truth. I mean, I don't shut people out. People don't shut me out. It's just, anyhow, know, like, and trust, right? So let me just touch on each of these. When we're open to our failures, hey, I failed, I struggled, I messed that up, we become more relatable. We absolutely become more relatable. You just wonder about people who've never had a struggle. It's kind of hard to share your experience with them. Some of the best coaches and consultants I know out there are people who've had challenges, who've had failures. A lot of the interviews I do with people, they've had failures. They're open about failures, and it's driven their success in building relationships because they become relatable. People get the opportunity to know them and know that, you know what, they are human. They make mistakes too. And because they've made mistakes, they're better able to guide me through to somewhere where I want to be. Because they've experienced it. They've experienced bad days. They've experienced things that don't go as planned and have been able to kind of figure it out. Gentleman out there, psychologist Tim Scherr, got a great podcast. One of his episodes, he literally did it just in the spur of the moment, got back to his car. He was bidding on a job or bidding on a consulting program, and he didn't get it. And he got back to the car and he shared with everybody his feelings related to that. I liked Tim before that. I've talked to Tim. Tim's been on my podcast. I've been on his. But that just made him so relatable. Because before that, I'm like, wow, this guy doesn't miss. And when I found out that he missed, I didn't like him less. I liked him more. He was more relatable to me. So the first thing with respect to owning and being open to our failures is just becoming better known, or known more accurately known. Let's put it that way. The second thing, like, when we open up to our failures, when we're open about, hey, we failed and this is what they are, this is what it meant to us, and this is how we overcame it. Um, People take comfort in the notion that we're human. They like us more. They just do. I remember when I was back in law school, I didn't know a lot about law school. I didn't know anybody who went to law school. I had fraternity brothers who wanted to go to law school, and at that point, none had gotten in. So I really didn't have an opportunity to kind of talk to anybody what it was all about. So I went off to law school, and I made a lot of mistakes, and I think one of the mistakes I made was hitting the books too hard. I mean, I just studied all the time, between classes, after class. I studied hard in college. I got to do even more in law school, and that wasn't necessary. If I had a little guidance, if I was a little more open to advice or asking for advice, I probably would have avoided that. But there was an individual that I became very good friends with. I was in his wedding. He was in mine, Greg Hickman. And he told me, he said, when I first met you, that first year, I really didn't like you. You were way too intense, and I just didn't really like you. And where he ended up liking me was the notion, he just realized that you're just another, I hadn't done well in a class as hard as I worked. And he's like, yeah, he's just, I realize you're just another, this is his words, you're just another dumbass like us. And by being open about my failures, not failing, but not doing as well, not hitting my goals, um, it built up a relationship there. It's a lifelong relationship. We're still in touch. And, you know, a big part of my life. Um, Anyhow, so it helps us owning up to our failures helps us be known. It helps us be liked. And then the last thing, it helps us be trusted. I talk to a lot of people, and I'm always leery of people who talk as if they've just got it all figured out. Yeah, I was, 6 months ago, I was doing this. I'm making seven figures right now. Um, I, I just, they don't own up to their failures, and it's hard for me. I'm suspect of people like that. I'm really suspect of people like that. Um, I it's not real. It's just not real. We all fail. We all struggle. I can't think of anybody I know that hasn't been some sort of setback, something that didn't work out. They may have been optimistic about it and really been able to. I saw a friend of mine, I mean, in 2000, with the tech crash in 2001 or 2001, it basically obliterated his business overnight. And I saw him pivot in a big way. It crushed him for about a day and a half, and then he moved forward from that. But he laughs about it, and he's in a better space now than he ever was before. In lots of reasons, his son has gotten into his new business, and he's probably doing better than he ever has. Um, but he owned up to it, and he was optimistic through it. So not I'm not talking about failing and being brave about it. I'm talking about that you never fail, that you've never been affected, you've never had a shortcoming. I have a hard time trusting those people, and maybe I'm alone. This is a sample size of one, but I just have the sense that they're not relatable. If you don't know somebody or don't like what you know about them, it's really hard to kind of trust them. Some examples I can use um, with respect to failures and kind of becoming more relatable. If you were with this program a couple weeks, I forgot to turn the sound on. I totally messed up, or I didn't have my I can't even tell you what I did or didn't do. What I do now is I check 3 or 4 times before I do a program. Um, so it doesn't happen anymore. But what I noticed from that, I got a lot of comments. I got a lot of people ribbing me here in the comments. I had a lot of people who also just, got me outside. People that I know, they would send me messages and just joke with me. Just, yeah, I screw up. I screw up all the time. I joke with my assistant. I say, we don't make the same mistake twice, but we're really creative, inventing new ways to making mistakes. And then in another example, back to the seven-figure people. Um, people tell me, oh yeah, I'm making 7 figures. I don't want to say I don't believe it, but why even saying it? Why even saying it? One of my best clients, I wrote about him in my book, Foundational Networking's Larry LeMasters. I won't get into all the details, but I knew for a fact he had money. He had lots of money. He never talked about it. He never talked about it. I knew because I had to do something, and I don't want to get into it because attorney-client privilege. He never talked about his money. He's just a good guy. He just, my friend who lost his business overnight, he does really well. He never talks about money. He never talks about money. So I just wonder about people who talk about money. But the last story I'll share, there was a gentleman, and I'll leave his name out of it. It's a good story. Great person. I just don't really have his permission to share. But he was introduced to me by Sajjad Hussein, who I've mentioned on this program from time to time. And when I got on the call with this person, we started to talk, and I just said, well, how's it going? And he just right away said, I'm still trying to get my first client. And my heart melted with that vulnerability. Basically saying, I am afraid of failing. And I couldn't help myself but just say, okay, let's dig in. You don't need to learn about me. Let me help you. Let me help you get your first client. It won't be today. But he did call me. It was a few weeks later. He was really excited. He said, I just want to let you know, I did get my first client. Once you get your first client, that's the hardest client. And then it's just real simple from there. So the point with respect to this particular program is failure's okay. You don't need to hide your failures. You can use failures to build relationships. I'm not saying you need to just gush over people with all the failures you have, but it's okay to reflect on them. Certainly as you're talking them through what they're going through, reflect on your failures, share them, because that'll help build them, bring them closer to you and help you build better know, like, and trust.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AmSpirit.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.